Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Asylum of Spoopage. Today, we're going to be talking about a movie that has a dinosaur, has terrible revenge at the end, has UFOs, has hand grenades, has a lot of death because they couldn't afford the cast, and has the main character from the Tremor series, and it's always good to see him. And I don't think I know anyone's name in this entire movie beyond one character.
Frank?
We were talking about 100 billion BC, supposedly a mockbuster of 10,000 BC, but it's not. It's actually a lot more. Well, let's put it this way: I never thought a movie would make me nostalgic for Sounds of Thunder. The Sound of Thunder, the Ray Bradbury short story that was made into a movie that pretty sure bombed in like the early 2000s.
Start Christian Slater.
Where someone stepped on a butterfly wing and then they kept on going back in time to fix it and then it ended up as all those lizard people or something like that. It was pretty bad, but I'd rather watch that than this movie. Yes, 100 million BC, a 2008 Asylum venture. Um, it's not the worst Asylum movie. I'm just to say it outright. It's not.
Well, much like how I described it last week before we watched it, it was, in fact, a movie. It had a beginning, it had a middle, and it had an ending. Therefore, by all technical requirements, it was a movie. So
Yes.
the plot of this movie is that Frank, who is a civilian with the equivalent rank of an admiral, apparently.
He's played by Michael Gross from
Yeah, the
Tremors.
guy from Tremors.
He was surprisingly not as well armed as I would have thought. I thought from Tremors, you'd
Yeah,
think he always carries guns around all the time.
yeah, right.
He does have a gun in this movie, but
Yeah, only
not as
used
much
it.
as you think.
Yeah. So Frank was apparently on the Philadelphia project, and they were experimenting in stealth technology. They talk about that boat that somehow disappeared and reappeared in Virginia that killed a bunch of people. That somehow that segues into time travel. So Frank was working on time travel, essentially. And he sends a group of his friends that are in the military into the past back in, what was it, 1949 that he sent them back there, I
Yeah,
think? Yeah. So he sent them back in 1949 to approximately 70 million BC. And then they never came back. And so
no,
now it's
it's
been,
112 million BC.
yeah, sure.
They actually say
So that
exact numbers that they get within months to years of somehow.
so then um he travels back
And by
or
the way, when
now
this film begins, it's 1998. Just so people know, that's 1998.
the movie begins in 1998.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So yeah, so it's
That's how
been
the time works with us. It's like 50 years. I'm like, wait, that's not. That's how the 50-year gap thing works.
I thought they said 60 years.
No, it's 50 because it
Irregardless.
starts in 1998.
Irregardless. So they he now has a team of SEALs, the Navy SEALs that they're gonna send back in time again. With him this time, because he never makes the same mistake twice.
The Navy's best and brightest. I think halfway through this movie, I realized this is the Navy getting rid of their worst and terriblest because they clearly didn't care about them and sent them back in time because they clearly needed to go away.
Yeah, and they
From
all die.
briefing onward, okay, you were in the Navy. Would you ever have a briefing with your superior officer? And they're at a research base, if I recall. They're in a Navy research base in
Yeah.
LA, which I don't know if any is actually in LA, but I suppose you probably wouldn't know. The general public wouldn't know anyway. And not like LA Harbor is a place you really want Navy ships in. But they're in a research base. They have a superior officer. They're briefing them. And then they're sitting on couches very comfortably, which I've never seen in a briefing ever. But who knows? Maybe it's just a nice room. But they bring out the guy who's giving him the briefing, and they just like razz him the whole time. Would that ever happen in a Navy briefing from elites? Because aren't SEALs like officers or?
No, I mean SEALs are enlisted. There's usually an officer, in charge of any individual.
Well, one was a
He,
lieutenant, one was a sergeant, sergeant at
he
arms. Is
was a
that what they
chief.
called him?
He was a
Chief.
chief. Yeah.
And then they had like the guy in charge. But like, would they razz people like that with their officers there?
No, absolutely not. So like even in the like super informal places that you work in the Navy, for instance on a submarine, when you are interacting with an officer, it is always formal. And if you are interacting with a civilian that in some way works for the Navy, you treat them like an officer. You sir them and you ma'am them and you're polite to them, especially if you don't know them. Once you get
You
to know
wouldn't
them,
have
like
to be told he's an SCS 5.
yeah, no, you wouldn't have to be told that he holds an equivalent rank to like an admiral or something like that because you're gonna treat him with respect. That's just how we're trained.
So SES 5 is an actual rank.
It is. It's not somebody I've ever worked with though, so I can't
I
tell you.
imagine it's something to do with like I believe probably some NASA people would have that because there's civilians in NASA and Air Force people in NASA, right? Or something. I can ask people in Space Force; they'll probably
Oh,
know
that's true.
better.
That's Tanya. She'd know. She
But
isn't she an
so
officer for Space Force?
she trains at their tech school.
Yeah,
She trains people.
Tanya
So
would probably know.
so they go back in time using not Stargate but Stargate. What they found was a borium tube that's like a mile long, and they apparently something gibberish. They can travel back in time to an
Tachyons.
exact point. And he
Tachyon.
went to dinosaurs, so he doesn't change the future. Even though I've read Ray Bradbury's story, yes, you can, but they go back in time to where the team
I
from 19
appreciate the pseudo logic of it. Like
they
we're gonna go
tried.
back to where before people existed, so that we can't affect people. And I'm like, all right, I'll accept
And
it.
at least Michael Gross could deliver those lines, and I paid attention. Like there were some actors in this movie that if they were doing that briefing, I'd just be like, nope,
Yeah,
turn off
literally
brand.
the second Michael Gross was not on screen, I stopped paying attention to what was going on for the most part.
Outside of one actor, the commanding officer, I paid attention to because I think I know who he is, but I don't remember him.
Commander
Um,
Dorn. The
yeah.
only actor I paid attention to that was not Michael Gross was whoever played his love interest. Because
Oh yes, yes, hot. But so they go back in time to try to find this team. They arrive there, and it's literally the first thing they see
oh
is a
wait,
guy inside a tree. Like,
they figured out they could go back in time because a lady and her significant other were having a horrible conversation while
oh yeah,
cave diving.
she was climbing a cliff
Yeah,
and
and her
fell.
safety harness broke and dropped her, and she landed. She probably fell at least 10 feet and landed on her face, but she was fine. And then they found a cave that had paintings in it that essentially were like messages to Frank. And they're like, oh, that means that they survived. So that we know that they made it back there and that they're still alive. So at least they gave us a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was cool.
So they
That's
go
how they
back.
found it.
They find the one member of the team embedded in a frickin' tree.
Which was wonderful. I love that.
That's nightmare fuel right there. Though, like the idea of like,
And
oh, you're in. Oh,
somehow he'd been embedded in that tree for 6 years, and he still looked pretty fresh. So that's impressive.
Um, and then they're traveling, and they start dying pretty quickly. The one of them gets like a plant spits on him, burns his face. Everyone's laughing at him, like, dude, a plant spit on him. You know, any type of plant that spits on you is not
Yeah,
the type of plant you want touching your face. And so
for
he goes in the
his.
water, and then like a crocodile eats him. I think it's terrible editing. Like the way they're shooting the crocodile thing.
I don't
I don't know
know.
exactly who died in there or how many people died, but I think he did.
I don't know how many people were even involved in this like movie. I don't know how many people were on the team. I don't know how many people were on the other team. I don't know where the random soldiers, how many random soldiers showed up at the end. Like there was just there was no explanation, and you grit absolutely no connection to any character in this entire movie
Outside of Michael Gross.
outside of Michael Gross. But that's because
But so anytime you see dinosaurs, it's terrible editing. Like they clearly don't have enough money to show them. So the crocodile, I think they're just shooting at the water, and then they say they don't want to lose anyone else, and
yeah,
then
and they
and
promptly
then
lose somebody else.
like uh And then like the lieutenant gets killed by like a raptor thing.
Yep.
A lot of them get killed by raptor things, and then guys. Well, no, first of all, I think the pterodons came first, right?
Let's talk about the pterodon death when they're
Okay.
trying to get away. So like they had to go back to wherever they teleported in from. So they're walking, they like, go through this like spiel of like how they have to do it, 2-file line, side by side. If they get attacked by something, they're gonna go for the front because it causes everybody else to scatter rather than going for the weakest, which doesn't come into play at all. But I thought it was cool they included that. But then so they're like walking along, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this pterodactyl just swoops down, grabs one of them,
Grabs the
starts.
lieutenant. Wasn't that the lieutenant? Because he says there's nothing
No,
out there.
no, because Lieutenant was already dead. Lieutenant was the raptor.
Okay.
Um, this one I don't know
Well,
who
the
this guy
raptor
was.
kills like half of them,
That's true.
and then they kill the
Uh,
raptors with spears,
I think
not
that was the
guns, because
blonde guy.
guns don't work against them for some reason.
I think that was the blonde guy that kind of looked like what's his name? Norman Reedus. The blonde guy looked like Norman Reedus. I think that's the one that got killed by the pterodactyl. Anyway, so the pterodactyl swings down, snatches him up, and starts flying away. And the other guy who was standing right next to him, who has a machine gun on his hip, pulls out a grenade and throws the grenade. Which, if the pterodactyl is within grenade throwing range, he is within range for a Navy SEAL, the most highly trained military operatives the Navy has, to aim at it with his gun and shoot it. Like, ridiculous. So the grenade
Yeah, these
goes off.
dinosaurs are bulletproof, though, as we find out. Spears made from stone is way more effective
And,
against these
and a
than
bow and
any
arrow.
guns.
Bow and arrow and a spear made with stone is more effective than a gun against these things, which is wonderful. And then the pterodactyl comes back. Like it blows up and does nothing. I think the pterodactyl might have dropped the guy, and then it comes back, and then he shoots it with an arrow. The leader of the survivors
Rescued
shoots
people.
it with an arrow, and it dies instantly. But this is what alerts Big Red the T Rex. I think it's a T Rex.
Yep,
Um,
big red
Big
T
Red.
Rex thing. That's like 60 feet tall.
Yeah, that they're like out and about, and then we get like this scene of its fake eye that's so fake looking that it's super fake, like opening up, and you're like, ah, that's an eye, I think, and it opened, so he must be awake now. So then that tells us, oh, Big Red's gonna come track him down, and then they get to the place with the teleportal. They jump through the teleportal, and Frank is like, I gotta, somebody's got to stay behind to close the gate. It's gonna be me because I'm old, and they're like, yeah, right. So everybody's like, okay, except the leader of the band of survivors, who's like, well, I'll come back
His
for you.
brother. That was his
Yeah.
brother.
Oh, was it? I did
Mhm.
not know that at all. But all
That's
right.
what Wikipedia says.
Oh, okay, cool. Fair enough. Um, so he's like, I'll come back for you, Frank, and then he's gone. And then while Frank is like trying to figure out, or, like messing with the little thing, they never explain how it works, and they just kind of it to make it work. That's how they do it in the whole movie. Um, While he's doing that, the Big Red shows up, knocks him over, and then goes through the teleportal. So,
So they'd already outrun Big Red earlier in the one though, because they went into the cave,
yeah.
and apparently Big Red's been waiting for the survivors to come out of cave openings. He just waits for traps because they can't come out of the same one twice.
Yes, that is the
Because
thing
they
they
said
talk
their
about.
commanding officer like died the first day when they hid in the cave for 6 days, and he went out the entrance and he just got eaten immediately, which
Yeah.
is how most people die in this movie. Raptors, of course,
Um,
killed a ton of them because guns don't work against these things. So they go into this portal, they go back to Los Angeles,
uh,
and the commanding officer is like, I take it didn't work. Like, no, it worked.
well,
That you're back.
this is my favorite thing about this. I
You
want to talk about
just left.
I want to talk about this real quick. So when Frank is leaving, Frank had like a love interest that was one of the people that went back in time.
That he didn't
Uh,
know loved him.
yeah,
Apparently, he found out when he got there.
she's a very good looking redhead. But so they like as she's about to go through the portal, they have like a moment, and it looks like he's about to kiss her, but he kisses her on the forehead, and you're like, okay, that's fair.
He's
We
also
don't want
like
to watch.
70.
Yeah, we don't want to watch an old guy making out with a young girl. That's fair. I got it. I accept this. So he kisses her on the forehead, right? And then when they get through the teleportal, she's like unconscious on the floor, and like they wake her up. And when she's waking up, the two survivors of SEAL Team right? Or like, we made it, and they immediately start making out, and it is the funniest thing. These just two dudes just start making out because they made it back. I was like, all right, hey, this was made in 2008. More power to you. I like this.
They are
And
rebels.
the commanding officer interrupts their makeout sesh. Is like, I take it didn't work. And it's just like, bro, these guys are making out in front of you joyfully. I think something probably happened
But
here,
he's like,
man.
you just left immediately, and where's everyone else? Oh, they're dead. They're dead.
All,
And then
all.
and then the T-Rex thing comes through and immediately stomps on half of the people you see in that room, and then runs off into LA, where the greatest part is so LA, the second largest city in the United States, with 8 million people around that time, thereabouts.
Something like
This
that.
T-Rex is stomping around it, and they call a military helicopter to visualize it, and they're just razzing on them, saying there's clearly no T-Rex there, who a 60-foot T-Rex, and they're using infrared, and like, it's not there, ha 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 ha. And like, wait,
Like,
don't use
oh,
infrared. It's
they're
cold-blooded.
they're endothermic or ectothermic,
And
whatever.
and then they
Whatever.
try to use it, and the T-Rex is like just below them and eats the helicopter.
The classic must-have giant monster scene in every Asylum film, where it has to come up and bite a helicopter or a plane out of the air. Required in every Asylum film that's got a giant monster,
And
and
then
they
it
have.
goes, and then it goes, we need to stop it. There might be civilians nearby. When the entire shot with the helicopter shows all of the freeways in LA, which are called the longest parking lots in the world for a reason, full of people, and this T-Rex, oh, there might be
Possibly
civilians nearby.
small
You don't see,
possibility.
actually, you do see a couple. You do see some guys cleaning up trash, putting them in a dumpster, and they get like destroyed because they clearly don't hear the 60-foot T-Rex coming, because in silent movies, CGI creations are silent,
just like
especially dinosaurs.
just like Jurassic Island.
There is no noise. And so they decide they need to get this dinosaur into the East Tunnel, which of course is in like every movie with LA. It's a very known thing. And it does what they were trying to do with the cave, where it doesn't go in, it just waits for them to come out, and as soon as they do, it kills people. But of course, I love it how the cops are over there and the cops just like leave. Like,
Yeah.
really, you can't see a giant red T-Rex? Where is he
Um, I
hiding?
I love that they're ultra marathoners as well. That
Well,
so
they didn't
like
mention how like they've been living where the air was so much cleaner and higher,
the
so that at
the
least made they thought about it
four
at least.
the four survivors that jumped out of the helicopter, which was a wonderful scene to watch. Them jumping out of the helicopter, slowing down in midair, and then landing on their feet with no cushion from a helicopter that was at least 40 feet in the air. Wonderful. Anyway, so they jump out, land perfectly, and then they just go sprinting off. And they're like, how are they running so fast? And he's like, well, they've been living in for the last 6 years, they've been living in a place with like 6% oxygen in the air, and we have 11% oxygen in our air, apparently. So that means their body is just hyper using the oxygen, so they're just like really effective. And then
Yeah, well, it's
immediately
like when
after that
people from
scene,
like Flagstaff go run anywhere in like Phoenix because they're used to
yeah,
like 7,000 feet, and they go down there like, you guys have no oxygen. Ha ha.
yeah.
You don't know how to breathe.
And then immediately after that, you see the redhead like just do this like awesome, completely unnecessary, like run up a car, jump over a fence, land perfectly, and
She
sprint.
had
And
to
you're
get
just
across the street somehow. It's not really safe to do that in
yeah,
LA.
I guess. But yeah, so they're super marathoners, so that was cool. And then they like lure the Tyrannosaurus Rex into the or to the tunnel, and then past Frank somehow knew exactly where to teleport in with a tank full of American soldiers,
From
and
World
then
War II.
from World War II, that then proceed to shoot the T Rex, but that doesn't do anything.
Because bullets don't do anything. Why would World War II
Yeah,
bullets do something if modern day bullets don't do anything?
fact. But they still do it. They also had a bazooka that they just didn't use. Um, but yeah, so then like he explains that like old Frank, after Big Red showed up and went through the tunnel or through the portal, old Frank used the time device to go forward in time to talk to himself in the middle future, and then told him what was going on, taught him how to use the rainbow device, and then promptly died. And then so young Frank used the time travel device to travel into the future.
So that's
And
what happened. Okay, because I was
yeah,
like, wait, I thought he went back to the 50s and said, "Don't do it," and taught him how
yeah,
to use it.
yeah. He taught him how to use it and was like, go save people. And somehow he knew exactly where to show up and exactly when, which is, good on Frank. He is a super genius. He graduated from MIT at 12 years old. So
I actually thought when they open, so then he opens up the portal to say, "I'm not going to repeat the same mistake twice," so they can go back to the 50s. And I thought he was literally going to open up so old Frank, can come back. I thought they were going to fix it by having old Frank return. Am
yeah,
I the only one who thought that?
I know. I also thought that. Yeah,
And
but
said
yeah.
he's
So
going back to the
they take
50s.
he takes like a spear version of the rainbow device and throws it into the T-Rex's mouth, and then spends a solid 30 seconds fiddling with the device to get
Uh-huh.
it to send him. It was like an unnecessarily long scene of him doing this. Which then sends the T-Rex back to 70 or 100 million BC or whatever. And then he's like, "Oh, it looks like you're stuck with us, Frank." And he's like, "Well, sorta." And then he opens up another portal to send them back to the 50s. And so the cute redhead, and the other random dude that was there go through the portal, but his brother and his now
Brother
wife
says
don't.
insists that he stay instead of,
Yeah,
yeah, he sent him instead.
yeah. Which honestly, given the option, right? Let's say I grew up in the 50s, or I was alive in the 50s, and then somebody was like, "Yo, go on this time travel mission." I was like, "All right, cool." Went on this time travel mission, lived through horrible experiences, and then come back to the future, the year 2008. I'm just like, it's 2008. And they're like, cool. We're going to take you back to the 50s. I'd be like, nah, no.
And at
I
least
can't.
the commanding officer did stay alive, right? The one who was in the
He did.
helicopter.
Yeah,
So at
Commander
least he
Dorn.
can at least identify them, because if he was not alive, they are screwed.
Oh,
No
yeah.
one knows who they are, and they're just wandering.
Yeah, they have no identification at all. It would be like what would have actually happened to Captain America if he hadn't been found by the military. Like,
Yeah.
totes and goes. Yeah.
If he
But yeah,
wasn't found
so,
by the exact person who knew who he was.
yeah, right. Wonder.
And
But
so,
yeah,
okay, I have to
so
say, the last shot of this movie is the biggest fu to the dinosaur ever. So, like, we send him back where he belongs,
it was great. It made
and
me so
you see
happy.
him go back, and it shows the T-Rex was sent back and embedded in frickin' stone, which is where you see him at the beginning. Actually, I thought he just died and stone covered him up. No, they sent him back, and he appeared like the guy in the tree, but in the rock, and he is just there in the
It made me
rock
it made me so happy because like
to terrorize them no more.
I said to you jokingly while I was watching it, because Jeremiah watched it before I did. So I was like watching it, and like before they had gone back in time, they talked about how like the side effects of time travel was just like you experience some like body pain, nausea. So they gave him like a not they didn't give him what they give us, but they didn't give him Dramamine, they gave him something else. Well, they gave him a nausea medication and an NSAID, and we're like, okay, you may still experience side effects, but this should help. And so when they initially travel back in time, the black guy, I think, immediately pukes. Like they get there like, is everybody okay? And he's just like, yeah, I'm fine. And just like vomits. And so when they send the T Rex into the future, I was just like, please make the T Rex vomit when he comes through the time portal. Just like make him puke because it would be hilarious to me. But obviously they did not, because it's Asylum, they can't afford to do things like that. But the fact that they like made the call back to the dude getting splinched into the tree by splinching the T Rex into the mountain made me so happy. It's probably my favorite thing of this entire movie was that scene. Probably.
So I would say this is the type of Asylum movie that's so dumb it's watchable, but
Mm-hmm.
not so dumb that it's really fun. That's what Zombies is.
Yeah.
Zombies, when a monkey throws eyeballs at someone in like the initial scene, you're in for some fun. But this movie, they couldn't afford to do the dinosaurs at all. They couldn't
Yeah.
afford to have extra people on scene. And like the reason why Flight World War II worked for me so much is because they knew their limitations and they stuck to it. And because they were in that set, they could focus better and they made it
Yeah.
work. This one, it's too much. There's
Their
it's
eyes
not
were
even
bigger
like
than
Age
their
of
stuff.
Hobbit's good. Like Age of
Okay.
Hobbit's at least knew its limitations and did what they could with their budget, which surprisingly was pretty good. But this one, they actually had shots of LA, which instantly means you can't afford anything.
Yeah, their eyes were bigger than their stomach with this one. Like they had very lofty dreams, but they had very little money to do said dreams.
And the sound
Um,
was off. It
the
was
sound
odd.
was it was odd. Like it sounded like they re-recorded everything. Initially, it sounded like they re-recorded everything in a studio and then dubbed it over.
It echoed
But
weird, right?
then,
It had a weird
what's that?
echo. It had a weird
Yeah,
echo, like to start with. And
yeah,
you don't
and
echo in nature like that.
then later on, it's like they didn't do that. So instead, it sounded similar to some of the recordings in Pod People, where the background noise was way louder than the
But not as bad
dialogue.
as Pod People. Not as
Not
bad.
as bad as Pod People, but the background noise was way louder than the dialogue. And then the blonde lady, who of course I didn't catch anybody's name in this movie except for Frank and Commander Dorn. The blonde lady, she only had like 3 or 4 lines in this movie, and all of them she said was borderline whisper. So it's really hard to understand what she said. Like while I was watching, I watch everything in subtitles, but while I was watching it, my angle was off, and she like says something to one of the characters, and I didn't catch a word she said, and I couldn't read it because I was at a bad angle for the reading the subtitles. And I just like I have no idea what was said there. I hope it's not important to the plot. Which granted is an Asylum movie, so odds are it's not important to the plot. But
Plot? There's a plot.
well, this isn't Battle Star Wars. There was a plot.
There was a plot in Battle Star Wars. It just I,
Was
I,
there?
there was a giant ship
That's true. But yeah,
with
so
three
that
people
was
on it.
so yeah, that was 100 million BC. I watched it on Tubi. I think Jared also watched it on Tubi.
Yep.
It's also on Pluto,
Pluto and Roku
Roku.
and basically for free stuff is. And it
Yeah,
has nothing to do with 10,000 BC, which is sad because I actually love 10,000 BC, and actually so does my spouse. We both quite actually love 10,000 BC with its ridiculousness, and not just because there's murder birds. And if you know me, you know I love murder birds.
true. Murder birds and mechs are like Jeremiah's things.
And has nothing to do with it. It's more like Sound of Thunder, which is
It was like Sound of Thunder mixed with the third Jurassic Park.
or the second one, Lost
Was
World,
it
where the T-Rex is in San Diego.
That's what I meant. Sorry, the second one.
Where
I went
apparently
to
the
the third
Navy doesn't
Jurassic.
get called, where apparently the military doesn't get called at all, because T-Rex going around, just no military there.
Yeah, who needs it? You know.
It's like
Anyway,
that Fast and Furious movie where there's like drones and Apache helicopters shooting each other over LA, and apparently the military wasn't called for like 20 minutes of them blowing buildings up because military
mhm,
response is that fast over major metropolitan areas in the United States.
yeah, yeah. So on our sliding scale of
Hey, they actually
Asylum
responded
films,
quicker in this movie than I see in most major blockbusters.
and
Albeit it
in
was
most
one
Asylum,
helicopter full of with a turd that clearly is like, haha, there's nothing down there. Haha. Oh, it's below you, dude.
literally directly below you. But yeah, on our sliding scale of Asylum films, this is probably lower mid. It's watchable.
It's mid, yeah.
There are some enjoyable scenes in it, but for the most part, it's not great. I'd probably watch this over Bigfoot again.
Yeah.
But I would definitely watch Mega Gatoroid versus Pythons over
Yeah.
this.
Quick question about the helicopter scene.
Yeah,
Okay, I know from ham radio licenses, there's entire bands of radio that are locked off for government use, especially when
that
it
is a
comes to
fact.
military and airplanes.
Yeah,
So there's a whole bit where he thinks he's being pranked by some kid on a military channel talking to him on the radio, telling him it's a dinosaur. As far as I know, civilians, unless you are into some stuff that you shouldn't have legally, you cannot just talk on a military
that is
wavelength.
true. Well, that's why he asked, like, how did you get onto this channel? Because he asked him that. Is because, like, yeah, there's no way.
And he
Like,
identified his rank and his name. Like he gave the legitimate
Yeah,
at
you're
least a
getting
legitimate form of
it's like I'm
communication and
Commander
identification.
Norm. This is what I do.
And you don't
Like
just laugh at
I'm
them.
telling you.
That's a good way
Yeah.
to get like in trouble and have some sort of disciplinary hearing, right?
Well, they did get in trouble. They got eaten by a dinosaur. So
That's
yeah,
karma.
that's what you get if you don't listen to a superior officer. Is you get eaten by a dinosaur. So maybe I should show this movie to everybody I work with. Anyway, so yeah, that was Sound of Thunder. I mean, 100 million
Million
BC.
BC.
Yep. And so here's our wheel, and let's go ahead and see what it's got for us. Wheel of Asylum. Turn, turn, turn. Tell us the
We're either
movie.
getting to the really obscure ones or the really new ones.
100 degrees below zero. All right, let's see if this exists first. Come on, just watch. Another movie that starts with 100. That's strange.
It is kind of ironic.
Isn't that ironic? Don't
100
you think?
degrees below zero. It's on Peacock. Oh
Interesting.
man, this
After
is day after
freak
tomorrow.
After
This is
freak
day after
climate
tomorrow.
and weather events destroy the world around them, a group of rogue scientists attempt to reverse the deadly new ice age.
This is day after
So
tomorrow, but it came out after 2012.
weird.
There's some weird timing on these movies where they're like, let's make this movie like 5 years later than we're supposed to.
You know, Asylum has yet to lose money on a movie, so
100 degrees below zero is on Peacock, Roku, Vudu, Tubi, Redbox,
yeah,
and
everything.
Redbox free, the free version of Redbox, the TV stuff, and Pluto TV. So join us next week for what undoubtedly be just as good as day after tomorrow.
Undoubted. Okay, thanks, bye.